These are the roads around the Chelmno death camp. The death camp, which is on the right, and the road here is clearly been done recently, though at the time it was also tarmac road, as was pointed out by one of the witnesses in Cloud Landsman's film Shoah. From the time he made the film to probably the last time I was here 3 years ago, the road was wouldn't have been changed. Now we have a nice new surface. How the Nazis found this place in the middle of nowhere and why they should want it here is in many ways hard to understand. The victims were taken to Kowo. They were put onto, they changed trains from a normal train to a narrow gauge, and then they were brought to the church or the palace in Chelmno, Nerem, and there they were transferred to gas wagons, and the gas vans killed them by driving around in the forest. The bodies were disposed of, and then they the vans went back for more. Cloud Landsman was only able to find 2 survivors. We believe there may have been 5. Simon Schrebnik was very young at the time he was brought here. He was in the Łódź ghetto, taken here in 1942. Just before the evacuation of the camp, 1945, they took the Sonderkommando out. He was shot, but he survived. The other survivor was a man called Potlepnik, who escaped in 1942. The camp had 2 periods. In 1941 it started, 7th of December 1941, the day of the attack on Pearl Harbor, the day of the counter-offensive in front of Moscow by the Soviet army, the same day as the gassing started here, before the Wannsee conference. And anybody who thinks that the Wannsee conference was anything other than a meeting just to be polite and say we're killing these people and what we want to do, what we need to discuss how we're doing it. There's the church from where people were held before being taken away to be gassed, and the palace stood to the left-hand side of the road, somewhere around here. And that was where people were held, first of all. 2 periods, a palace period and the church period. The 2 periods of existence, because the camp was actually closed down in 1943. Despite the fact that the ghetto in Łódź was still quite large. The ghetto in Łódź was productive, and the local Nazi officials wanted to keep it there. The same thing has happened in Lublin until the Enterfest massacre. The Nazi officials, the locals, wanted to keep the Jewish population alive and working, because they were making so much money out of it themselves, whereas the orders from above, from Himmler or whoever, wanted these people dead. So on the 7th of December 1941, the gas chambers, the gas vans I should say, at Chelmno started operating, initially taking people from ghettos in this area. Tiny ghettos, not sealed ghettos, taking a number of people from them. The first people were taken from Łódź in January 1942. The first people to escape was in January 42. One of the escapees, a man called Chełmno, who is for me one of my personal heroes, he came from Izbica Kujawska, clearly a very religious person. And he escaped from here. He stopped off at Dąbie, where he told the rabbi there what was happening. And that's a letter from Cloud Landsman in his film Shoah reads from the rabbi of Dąbie to others, and so the word was already out. We also see that word spread quite quickly, because in Warsaw there are the Ringelblum archives, a collection of letters sent not only from here but above all from here, speaking of impending destruction, and people knew about it. Chełmno made his way to Warsaw, where he made a report, and he continued on to Zamość. In Zamość he had relatives. He found out about the Bełżec camp, and one line I remember from one of his letters: "In Bełż ist gas." And so he knew. He was captured in the ghetto at the beginning of April 1942, and he was murdered in the Bełżec death camp, no doubt on arrival. But the 3 months he had to warn the world, unfortunately, didn't help. People were not taken from Warsaw until July the 25th. So in fact, he'd been dead 6 or 7 weeks by the time people were taken from there. This is Dąbie, formerly a shtetl. Population was almost entirely Jewish, and these people would have been murdered in Chelmno. So here we see some more of the scenery to the south of Dąbie on the country roads. For the Nazis coming here in December 1941, also it must have been very bleak, snow on the ground, very cold. Of course not so cold for them as it was for the victims. One of the guards spoke to Cloud Landsman. He said how long it took from Łódź. It took 3 hours. We haven't got the testimony of any of the victims, so we don't know how long it took the victims. Most victims were taken by train to Koło, and there they were transported onto smaller open narrow gauge railway, so rather than carriages. Some have been taken on railway, in transport, in cattle cars as we call goods wagons. Others would have been taken in other forms. I think some may have been taken by truck. today it's lovely summer's day. But even so, I mean, this part of Poland, okay, it's agricultural. It's not really poor, I suppose, by Polish standards. It's, but it is it's comparatively desolate place to bring people to. And so we're left again with the reason they do these things in secret.